On Thursday night, we gathered out back for the first time on Thursday night on the back 40. And we thought about a young man named Patrick who died 9 years ago. He was only 29. Patrick was a very gifted, diverse young man. Had his share of demons, like we all do. He battled addiction. He was bipolar. And his parents own a biker bar in Frankfurt, and they also own Mackey's Pub here in Orland Park. And when Patrick passed away, instead of shutting the door and being quiet, Patrick's family got very active in the bipolar community to help and support other families that go through the same thing. We're having prayers around Patrick's tree. It was about 8:30. The sun was setting and it was dusk. And as we walked back to the church, one of Patrick's friends is a bagpiper. And he stood all by himself in the middle of the back 40, all by himself, and was playing Amazing Grace. And so as we walked back to the building and just looking out over the sunset and it's getting dark and it's kind of misty, and just seeing the flags wave in the background from the veterans area with the bagpiper, it just got all the juices flowing. And I was thinking of those who have paid the price. And I was trying to imagine what it would be like to be home and have somebody dressed in their uniform knock on your front door and inform you that your son or daughter was killed in action. And so after worship that night, I go home, and my son and his wife and the grandkids are in town. And I heard the laughter in the kitchen. I saw them go safely to bed. I got up in the morning and plugged in the coffee. I came to church and unlocked the front door. I walked out back with my dog, spent some time in the veterans area, and all I could think of, if it wasn't for you, couldn't do that. All those ordinary, common moments and things we do every day that we just take for granted, the freedom to just be ordinary. And so this morning as we gather, I think of the people in Manchester, kids like ours going to a concert, and over 20 of them will never come back. I think of the innocent kids just a few miles from here in places that we grew up, Roseland, Englewood, and they can't even play on their front porch because they might get shot. And then this morning I saw the sun rising over LaGrange Road, and I saw that foggy mist in the back 40, and I was thinking to myself, why would anybody ever, in the history of their life, do one thing to be mean to somebody else? Why would we ever say anything that would demean another person's dignity and self-esteem? Why would we ever, with all the gifts that we have, do anything to dishonor the flag, to help get in the way of any person trying to achieve their dreams and their goals and trying to be the person God wants them to be? Because America is more than just a country. There's lots of countries. But America is a spirit. It's a lifestyle. It's a bond of incredible diversity, challenging us to use the gifts that we have and to be open to the gifts that other people have for us. And our calling, especially this weekend, is to make sure that every veteran who serves our country, that everyone who gave his or her life, that we never ever forget what they have done for us. It's one thing to die. It's another thing to be forgotten. And if there's one thing I think we do okay here, we don't forget. We remember. We allow the past to come to life. I mentioned last week in my meditation, and I only have one thought per week, so I'm sorry to bore you with it. But I attended a funeral mass for one of the grizzled goofs who works out every day at the Riviera. And I got there just before Jean's mass was about to begin. And everybody is lined up behind the casket, ready to go in for the mass. Now, I don't have a big bucket list. I mean, my bucket list, I want to go to Naperville for dinner sometime, and a few things like that. But I have a religious bucket list, and my religious bucket list is this, and I'm sure it'll never come true. I want to see the day when there are absolutely no rules or regulations for people who are allowed to come forward to receive the Lord's Supper. Because to me, the altar is like a spiritual Statue of Liberty. It welcomes the tired. It welcomes the oppressed. It welcomes the non-churchgoer. It welcomes the Catholic and the Lutheran and the Jewish people, because Jesus was Jewish from start to finish. I just wish for the day where we take all those regulations about who's invited and just say, come here. And if you want the bread and the wine, just take it. It's never going to happen. I just had to get off my chest. I'll stop right now. Okay. Well, anyway, I get to the funeral mass. It's just about to begin, and the priest looks at me, and he goes like this. And he could tell I was in my dress blue jeans and sport coat. And the priest comes up to me and says, listen, I've just lost my voice. Will you please read the gospel and do the homily? And I'm thinking to myself, the gospel, the homily, I didn't come here prepared to preach. Do you have people in your life, you're not necessarily best friends, you don't necessarily hang out, but people in your life that you cross paths with on a regular basis for whatever you're doing, and somehow, some way, that person that you kind of know but don't know is a life changer? Well, see, Gene is a grizzled veteran of life. He doesn't go to church, even though there was a mass for him. He's been around the block. He does marathons, loves to fish, loves to golf. And I've often thought that if Jesus ever came back again, which we could use him now, he might look a little bit like Gene. Weathered, human, with a few marathons under his belt. Well, and the funeral director eyeballs me when it's time to read the lesson and the homily, and I get up behind the pulpit. I have no idea what I'm going to say. I look at Gene's wife, I look at his son and daughter, I look at his grandkids, and all of a sudden I think of one word. I think of the word peddler. You see, the first time I met Gene at the bar at the Riviera, my buddy introduced me to Gene. And like most people, I'm trying to think of something to talk about. So I said, Gene, what kind of work do you do? And he looks at me and he said, you wouldn't be interested. I'm just a peddler. Well, a couple weeks later, I see him again. And I said, Gene, I don't mean to annoy you, but I'm curious. What kind of work do you do? And he said, I told you, I'm a peddler. And so I find out from somebody that he's actually a salesman, and he sells little teeny-weeny parts for machines to factories. That's what he does. He's a peddler. And so I look at his family from behind the pulpit, and I said, I understand that your husband, your dad, your grandfather, was a peddler. And I know he didn't go to Mass very often. In fact, in this funeral, this is probably the longest he's been in a church in 10 years. But I said, by the way, your dad, your husband, your grandfather, and Jesus have a lot in common. And you could just see they go, what is this guy trying to say? And it's because Jesus was a peddler, and a good one. And Jesus peddled stuff that you cannot buy. He peddled decency and kindness. He peddled forgiveness and openness. He peddled unconditional love and acceptance. And I say, your husband, grandfather, he peddled parts. But today you are here because he peddled for you unconditional love and acceptance. And now we've come together to say goodbye in that spirit. And I realize all of us are peddlers. And what we peddle is up to us. And we're a country of peddlers. And it's easy sometimes to lose our way. But today we say thanks to those who peddled for our freedom and peddled that unconditional, intangible spirit that gives us the hope to live every day. And they pay a big price for that. And each one of us needs to do our best every single day to make sure that their sacrifice is worth the price that they paid. And you know something? It really is, because we're peddlers. Amen. We'll continue with the creed. It's on page 105. If you can, please rise.